Hello, 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, blue sky and sunshine outside, but what does that mean for us? No chance. We are here to talk about rugby in Scotland with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and him, the editor of Scotland Rugby News, the one and the only, big, handsome Gav. How are you, sir?
Very well, thanks, Bruce. I'll pay you later for the introduction. How are you? How's your never caught up last week? So, how's your week been?
No, it's been good. Missed you, big chap. Missed you.
Likewise.
It's been interesting. The obviously Test Rugby's back with the Rugby Championship. There's a few things going on. My good mate started his All Blacks career and is a bit gutted that they got that loss against Argentina, which is, I think, sharpened focus. It'll be interesting to see what they do this week. But there's a lot of chat around the Southern Hemisphere rugby, and I don't really know a lot of the ins and outs of it. South Africa making noise, Australia, Joe Smith, Argentina delighted, All Blacks. There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there. Interesting you say Test Rugby's back. I'm not sure it ever really went away.
Well, that level of Test Rugby, again, I'm back to it. There's too much of it, but that's their season. So get on with it.
It's that Argentina result. I'm not 100% sure if it was a surprise or not, because the All Blacks didn't look like they'd hit their kind of straps yet against England. Argentina are a wee bit more settled, but I mean, yeah, to beat New Zealand in New Zealand's some achievement, and yeah,
and score that number of points,
and outscore them in terms of tries as well. I think the other game is obviously the one of interest from a Scotland point of view, because we played both of them in the autumn. That was pretty ugly to watch. I think South Africa look a serious rugby team when they move the ball. They look a serious rugby team when they scrum and maul. I don't know how you stop them. And Australia looked bang average. But I'll be interested to see Australia against another opposition, because the Boks might just be so far ahead at the minute. Like, they've got everything, and they've got probably at least two players in every position. I genuinely think now they've got the perfect squad, and I don't know where their weak link is.
Yeah, I hate to be doom and gloom, but all of this is tough news for Scotland. England are getting better. Ireland are maintaining a level. France are wounded and still very good. Those four down south. I mean, Argentina are now proper, serious contender rugby team. Like, no question. The Pacific Islanders with the teams in their Super Rugby, that can only be a good thing. And the rise of Portugal and Spain. When you see the qualification for the Rugby World Cup, obviously Scotland are in, but that's now, a Belgium rugby were posting, look, here's our route to the World Cup. You're like, whoa, wow, like, properly look out. These countries are not messing around.
And I think when you look at the World Cup, and everybody, this time 12 months ago, everybody was moaning, it's a nonsense that we've got Ireland and South Africa. Like, we're probably going to have to get used to that. That is, unfortunately, unless we're like fifth in the world, that's going to be that bracket that Scotland are stuck in. I think that's why, like, it's so important. Looking short term, it's so important that they have a good autumn, but longer term, they actually need to start beating some of these Southern Hemisphere teams and the likes of Ireland, because we're going to end up in a World Cup pool again where we're saying, well, we've been drawn against France and the All Blacks, and only two go through. Now, I get the expanded World Cup might mean that Scotland get to a round of 16 game, but is that actually any better than, you've made it through the pool, but I don't know. It's like the fastest loser at the Olympics, isn't
it? It's so tough. The standard at the top is accelerating. Like you're saying, South Africa. Like I don't know how you beat South Africa. Like you're hoping you're not hoping because that may be the wrong. But if they get a red card in the first minute because somebody does something stupid, you're maybe at the races. But that you're looking for some kind of external thing to happen, and then not the bottom, but that middle tier of teams between sort of 10 and 20 in the world ranking, they're all going, well, hang on, although we might stay at 14th best in the world, we're a better 14th this year than we were 2 years ago. So and it's it's good. It's a worry. It's as long as it's broadening the game, Scotland going to these countries and broadening the game and getting more people in, that's the gold for me. But yeah, you're right. The autumn is going to be an interesting one. And what do you do against Portugal? These things are tough. Anyway, to get to that though, hopefully we're going to have decent seasons for Edinburgh and Glasgow. We'll start with Edinburgh. Sean Everett this week. Now I maybe shouldn't misquote him, but he's been pretty ambitious with some of these statements this week.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I mean, would I expect the Edinburgh coach to come out and say, "Yeah, I don't think we can win the league"? Like, definitely not. I think would be completely counterproductive. But actually, to say on day one of their sort of public-facing pre-season, actually, yeah, we're setting our stall out. Glasgow have shown us what we can do, and they have shown teams like us that we can go on and win the league. Is interesting. Is bold, and I saw some quotes from him saying that year one was about sort of solidifying, and then this year's about developing their attack, which I think rings true to what probably we all saw at the Hive, in that they kicked the leather off it and didn't give Duhan much at all. They obviously missed Buffelli, they missed Darcy Graham, so having them fit will be a massive bonus. But yeah, look, it's an interesting season for Edinburgh because kind of all eyes from a Scottish point of view will be on Glasgow and their attempt to sort of back up what they did last year. But yeah, so this age-old Edinburgh Edinburgh got too good a squad to finish 10th. It's just not good enough,
It's a kind of funny one though, how priorities or ambition or objectives can change. If Glasgow don't win, is that a poor season for them next year in comparison to this year? Like what does that do to their aims and objectives? Edinburgh, everybody wants to see progress, and it's the stuff that's sort of churned out after every game. Oh, we're learning, we'll get better. Not everybody across the board. Oh, we'll take the lessons and yada yada yada. The thing we've heard a million times before. But what does success actually look like for Edinburgh?
I think the first thing is they've got to get in that. They've got to get in the playoffs. I think if I was Sean Everett, I'd want a playoff at home. So I think that probably is their to the top of their goals. But yeah, playoffs is a minimum requirement. And then, as Glasgow showed, once you get into all that knockout rugby, anything can happen, and you could cause a couple of upsets, and who knows? But they're miles off that.
Perspective's tough though, because we've just been talking about South Africa, saying how do you beat them? Now, not all their players, but a lot of their players are playing in the South African teams that are in the URC.
Yeah.
So how do you beat them? And then you talk about Leinster, who, by all accounts, last year will be absolutely gutted with their outcome. Munster, probably not far away from that. The Welsh teams, I don't know where their ambition lies. I can't even begin to try and work out what's going on in Wales. The Italian teams are getting better because Italy are getting better, which means their teams are getting better. So they're going to be tougher to beat. So then you bring it home and you go, right, Edinburgh last year finished there. Anything above that would suggest progress. You're saying playoffs. like what then happens? I just, it's such a tough league. It's a really tough league to be successful.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think the other thing is the manner in which Edinburgh went out of last season was a defeat at home, albeit, yes, to then defending champions Munster, but to just kind of, they went out with a whimper in against Benetton, and that feels like it happens too often with Edinburgh. In the absolute crunch games, they don't turn up. And I think that's one of the big things. I think the style has to be a wee bit more like what I think Edinburgh fans have become used to seeing. But I think they would all. I'd actually be interested to know if Edinburgh fans would forego the style for results, or if they would rather see a team play the sort of perceived Edinburgh way, the Mike Blair, let's throw it about from everywhere, but it didn't always come off, and they sometimes got on the wrong end of the result. Because I sometimes think that the style is actually some supporters want that style more than they want the end result.
Hey, speaking as a Hibs fan, trust me, I'd take the result over style every Saturday and twice on a Sunday. Don't you worry about that. Because one of the other things about how we've got rugby set up, if Scotland are successful, there's almost a, well, that's all right. But I think both Glasgow and Edinburgh have now been around long enough and got a fan base where actually people want them to perform and they want Scotland to do well. And Scotland, I think, are going to do well if Edinburgh and Glasgow are doing well. You know, the back line was heavily weighted towards Glasgow, which he kind of understood because of how things were going. But a measure of Sean Everett is not going to be how many Edinburgh players have you got in the Scotland squad. You know, that's not going to be an acceptable one, but it's potentially a measure of teams in other sports. Well, okay, you finished that position, but you've provided that number of players for further up the chain. I don't think that's accepted anymore, is it?
No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, let's all give ourselves a pat on the back. We finished 9th, but, Grant Gilchrist had a great season and started 10 games for Scotland. Doesn't wash anymore. And I think that you're seeing, I think years ago there was a perception that the national team coach, particularly in the days of like Frank Hadden, Andy Robinson, Scott Johnson, had more of a say about which Edinburgh and Glasgow players played where and for how long on a Friday, Saturday. I think now there is much more autonomy from Sean Everett, Franco Smith, or whoever it may be, to actually make those decisions based on their own needs and wants and successes and failures rather than dictated to from above. That's not to say that, providing players for Scotland is obviously a good thing, but yeah, I don't think it can be used as a barometer for a team's success. I think they now have to be judged, and they actually have to be judged on their own merit. So I think Edinburgh's success would be, for me, making the playoffs, whereas Glasgow's to me is different. To me, if Glasgow don't make the home playoffs and then probably a semi-final or a final after winning it, you'd be disappointed. And I think Glasgow's...
Which is bonkers, because there's no chance that would have been, even if we'd had that conversation in February, you wouldn't have been saying that for Glasgow next year.
To be honest, I think if we'd had this conversation at the end of May, and you said you offered Glasgow, okay, you can finish in the playoffs in 24-25, they would say, great, that sounds perfect. But now that they've almost exceeded expectations by winning it, the challenge is that they've raised that standard, and now they've got to find a way to maintain it and do it all basically this, with this foundation that they laid last year, because fans will expect that, and if they can produce, I think that the trick, like I said this at the time, the 2015 title win felt like the culmination of that Glasgow team's journey. And a few of them, it wasn't long before Finn and Nakarawa and Hoggy had moved on. I think the challenge for Glasgow now is that they've actually got a team, probably this year, next year, that's going to be pretty solid. Guys who are all in their kind of prime to go and build on that success. And we'll see how they get on.
It's interesting you say that. I'm smiling because that was what was in my head. Glasgow have won it without probably planning they were going to win it. So now there's a whole load of boys, like Stafford McDowell, Player of the Year, didn't play at the business end. So surely that would suggest that's a strength. Tom Jordan was playing at 10, who we've heard before, isn't it? You bring in Adam Hastings. George Horn, Jamie Dobie's now got more Scotland caps behind and that experience. So does he become a better player as well? You've got some of their young forwards who gained experience probably before they were the plan or before they were ready. They're now Scotland internationals. They're coming back in a team that's like Glasgow have almost arrived quicker than we thought, but actually could make them stronger.
100%. I think, you go back 2 years, Glasgow shipped 70 points to Leinster. Like, would anybody have said 2 years' time, a nucleus of that squad will go to South Africa and win the league? And, folk would have laughed at you, and that's not being disrespectful to any of the players. It just seemed so ludicrous. It's so, for them to have turned it round so quickly has been an incredible journey. But I think the point you made about Stafford's a good one. Like, they've got such a good squad, and everybody talks about Edinburgh on paper, and Edinburgh have got a great team on paper. When there are bits of that team that when you take out some of the key, if you take out Schumann or take out, it's changed this season, but Ben Healy last year, when they started to lose Duhan and, Darcy and Buffelli, they were really short in terms of competing with the top teams in the URC. So,
which is now also bonkers, because that means Harry Patterson, Scotland international. Like, where does he get a kick? Matt Scott's coming in. What does that mean for the centre partnership? Because we've got Tuipulotu, James Lang, Matt Curry. We've got Ross Thompson and Ben Healy. Ben Healy last year played everything. Having Ross Thompson would suggest Ben Healy's not going to play as much rugby as he did last year. So what does that do for Ben Healy in Scotland? What does that do for Ross Thompson in Scotland? Adam Hastings along the road. What is that? And Finn's obviously the man wearing number 10. So I'm going to be really interested to see Sean Everett's selections. Yeah, I would be closer to picking the Glasgow squad at the moment. Glasgow team. Edinburgh, I think there are question marks over a few of the positions. Well, probably between 9 and 13. I think 11, 14 and 15 probably pick themselves. 1 picks itself. 2 probably picks itself. 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. There's some boys there that you're thinking, right, they're going to start most of the games if they're fit. But does Ben Velicott start at 9? Who starts at 10? Does Ben play with somebody different for Ali Price? Is it that you're playing a 9 and 10 combination? I'm really interested to see what their plan is.
Yeah, and I think that will be interesting. I think reading, there's a story on the site. We obviously spoke to Sean Everett about Mosese Tuipulotu, and he's saying, give him time. I think he only played 12 minutes of Super Rugby this year. So, it is going to take him time, and ultimately he will need games. It wouldn't surprise me to see him play for Edinburgh and in the he'll play the friendlies and whatnot. But it wouldn't surprise me to see him playing for Edinburgh A in some of these A-team fixtures to get him up and running, because he's come from Australia having played shoot shield level. So the rigours of professional rugby will be tough for him, I think, initially. I think that's probably, reading between the lines, part of the reason that Matt Scott's come back and they've allowed to let Christine go, is they want somebody who can hit the ground, absolutely running, is fit, knows the club, knows a lot of the players, and knows the league. So,
Matt Scott next to Matt Curry, I think, is an interesting one. But you've got Mark Bennett, and you've got James Lang, who's played a fair bit of rugby for Edinburgh. And there's a skill, and it's probably an art rather than a science of keeping those players happy, but also sharp. Glasgow showed last year they could bring players in having not played a lot of rugby, but they seemed to hit the ground running. Like, they just went in and boom, away they went. Edinburgh's got a job on there. How do you, the Ross Thompson, Ben Healy one, I'm really interested to see, because I don't think either of them wants to be wearing 22.
No, I mean, Ben Healy sat on the bench for Scotland, hardly got on during the Six Nations, didn't have a great summer. He will want to come back and feel like in the position that he felt 12 months ago when he just moved from Munster. He'd won the URC with them. He came to Edinburgh and he was basically their only senior 10. So chances are, I know Kinghorn would still have been there the first half of the season, but chances are he was starting every week at 10. A year later, you don't want some guy coming along the road from Glasgow and saying, actually, at the road, son, I'm gonna take that jersey off you. And by the way, within 12 months you've been or within 6 months you've been relegated, playing from sitting on the bench from Scotland to sitting on the bench for Edinburgh. And then what does that do for, as you said earlier, international aspirations? It's a tough one.
Well, in international aspirations, you've got Wes Houston and Boffelli, and you've got Harry Patterson, Darcy Graham, Duan van der Merwe. Cammy Scott had a bit of a run at 15, although he tended to go in at 10. I think Cammy's a cracking player. He needs to play rugby. Edinburgh A might give him that. That there's just some really interesting selections. Whereas Glasgow, I think Stafford's probably got a job on now to get rid of Sione and Hugh Jones for him to play or him to start. Jamie Dobie seems to have played a lot in the wing, but was that needs must? Does he get to play more at 9 with George Horn?
Interesting, because that one is the one for me that, like, over the summer has grown arms, legs, and just seems to have really, really, like, totally changed. Because when Gregor spoke and he'd named the squad to go on the summer tour, he said, we see Jamie as a 9 who can fill in if we need him to on the wing. When we spoke to him before the Uruguay game, he said, I think Jamie Dobie could be an international winger. So where does that leave him with Glasgow? And then where does that, I never like this situation, whether it's Blair Kinghorn, Chris Patterson, where you're shunting players from one position to another, and you feel like, all right, the guy who's starting at 9 is also covering the wing and has then got to learn 3 playbooks and
does that make life easier for Gregor that he can go 6 and 2 on the bench, because Jamie can cover, hopefully your winger can go to 15, although I'm not sure if, Kyle Steyn, Duan, Darcy, none of the 3 of them are probably international fullbacks.
Darcy's done it for Scotland, but I suppose the theory there would be Kyle Steyn could go to the centre. Hugh Jones could go to fullback.
But for one thing happening, that's 3 moves.
But this is it. Like,
It's,
and
you're right though. I mean, the international bit. You said it before about coaches having an impact on who was picked for Edinburgh and Glasgow. If I'm Sean Everett and I think my best back 3 is Boffelli, Duhan, and Wes, then I'm picking 2 players that kind of play for Scotland. So does Gregor go and chap Sean's door and say, by the way, Sean, I don't know how these things work. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, and I think
I hope Darcy comes back flying and makes it. Just listen. You got to pick Darcy Graham because he's Darcy and he's flying. And Duhan similarly. The Scotsman that I am would love to think Harry Patterson can be at 15, but Boff he's an outstanding rugby player and seems to be a bloody good human as well.
I think one of the things I want over the next, whether it's year, 2 years, however long it takes, is we get to a point where we are in the same boat about Bill Matta leaving that we are Emiliano Boffelli. Because 5 seasons ago, somebody says, look, Bill Matta's going to leave Edinburgh. There would have been folk panicking. But actually, there's now such a good depth in that back row and a load of options that even without Bradbury coming back, I think they'd have done okay. But take Boffelli out that team, take his goal kicking out, but just his general presence, take all that out, and I think you're a poorer team. I really like Harry Patterson, and I think there's something quite refreshing about the way he plays. Like, I think he's just somebody who looks like he's playing schoolboy rugby on a Saturday.
But it's happened quicker than anybody planned for Harry because needs must. But that's one of those things of giving somebody a chance, and he took it and he showed actually I am ready. I can go. But then he goes from that player of the match almost performance against France to I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And you mentioned Maggie there. Like Maggie was player of the year at Bristol.
I mean, I can believe, but it seems odd to me that it's 2 years since he played for Scotland, because his form in those 2 years has been so good and consistently good that, yes, we've got good options, Matt Fagerson, Jack Dempsey, but he's got to be in that conversation. And
so Maggie starts at 8 for you for Edinburgh.
Yeah, for me in that team.
Who's 6 and 7?
It's interesting because I think they've now got enough depth that you could chop and change. But first choice, I would go Ritchie and Watson still. Crosby on the bench.
Like the Hamish one is one of those questions, and I don't know if you're tough enough to ask it. He says as he winds about like Hamish was, there was a few folk on social media. Hamish Watson first name on the team sheet, and he's not with Scotland. And Luke Crosby is just relentless with the way he performs. I mean, he's ridiculous. Connor Boyle's still fighting. Ben Muncaster. There's so many, but you want them to play so well that it isn't a conversation.
And I don't want. This is like, I feel like something's happening with Crosby that is happening with or how it was almost happening with Kinghorn, in that he started the season last season 8 for Edinburgh. He can play 6. He can play. I would rather we said, do you know what? And he started for Scotland and Wales at 6, and I think that's his best position. But let's stop chopping and changing. Him to 6, Ritchie to 7, Crosby to 7. It feels all over the place. Let's have 2 guys who are 6s 2 guys who are sevens, and then a couple of number 8s, and that'll do. Let's not have them all trying to do.
I kind of hear you. There's also a bit of me feels like the difference between a 6 and a 7 now is,
Oh, totally.
you know,
It's
Jamie Ritchie has aspects of that old-fashioned 7, creating turnover, slowing the ball down. You know, maybe, and Hamish has not really been a 7 that links things up.
no.
That wasn't his skill set, but Hamish, the way he throws himself around and he's so mobile, and his like talking a relentless work ethic, and yeah, I just and Jamie, Jamie's your leader, so it's not just the rugby player you've got there; it's somebody that's been captain of his country. And like Ali Price is so experienced at 9. Ben Velicott is electric, absolutely electric.
I think
And I
that's
don't.
that selection, the halfback selection for me dictates largely how Edinburgh are going to even attempt to play. I think if you play Ali Price, his skill set is contestable kicks, not so much. I mean, he was, Ali 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago at Glasgow was, I'm coming on up the tempo. He's now become the Mr. Reliable, decent boot. And Ben Velicott is like, let's have a go from, I don't care if I'm in Moan 22.
See, scrum half for Scotland, I find intriguing, because Glasgow appear to have the Scotland representatives, but Ben Velicott and Ali Price, and Charlie Shields still there, and then across at Glasgow, Sean Kent. Like there's a number of players there. Ben Afshar went for the experience to, where does Benny get to play? There's a lot for those coaches to manage. The squads feel big to me.
It's interesting as well because you've got guys, who are arriving this summer. Somebody like Paul Hill has arrived, a Premiership winner, but he can't play for Scotland. So is it in the best interest of Scottish rugby to start a guy at tight head, a position that we don't have depth in, no matter what anybody else says, we just don't.
I know, and there you go. So there's
a
Sebastian. Belter. Like, does he have to play to allow everybody else to play well? Like, I'm not even going to pretend to know the difference, right? But if he makes a significant difference in the set piece, does that then allow Ewan Ashman and Dave Cherry to show themselves? Does that allow Ali Price and Ben Velicott to get the ball away? But like, I don't know that if the knock-on effect is that significant between him and Sebastian. But I'm really, really interested to see, probably a game where it's Munster at home or something where, right, that must be his top 23. Like, that's the message he's sending by picking that squad, and they can tell you in the press at the press conference, oh, we've picked a team for this game. But if you're picking a team for Leinster or Munster at the Hive, it's likely you've picked what you think is your strongest team.
And I think
regardless of what they tell the folk in the press.
You're totally right. But I mean, if you look at Edinburgh's, I've got Edinburgh's fixture list in front of me. Leinster at home, Bulls and Lions away, Stormers at home. Right. Well, there's 4 games.
That's a good 18 points at the start of the season.
Go and sort yourself out with your top team there for 4 weeks, because like that's about as tough a start as it gets. Leinster at home and then South Africa back to back away is a tough old start.
Yeah, and you look at the fixture list, and you're not really looking at, right, we can probably give him a break there. And who knows what the Welsh teams will do, because sometimes when your back's against the wall and you're playing for your contract, maybe you do play a better. I don't know. I think it would be hard to go away from the tradition of the South African teams are going to be really good, the Irish teams are going to be really good, and then it's who's the best of the rest, or who can hit a streak. If Edinburgh get a good result in that first game, all of a sudden, oh yeah, boy, we're on it here. Momentum's is so crucial. And I was having this chat to somebody recently. It's really easy to lose. Anybody can lose. Winning's really tough, and winning consistently is really tough.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And we saw that a bit with the end of the sort of to go back, but the end of the Danny Wilson time at Glasgow was spiraled from one loss to all of a sudden they were taking 70 points in Dublin, and actually that happened over a space of 4 or 5 weeks, not 2 or 3 months. It was a pretty quick end, but they found that once they hit that losing streak, they couldn't shake it.
Come December, when it's the 1872 Cup, I think it's going to be really interesting. Really, really interesting. Because
those games...
I think probably going to say similar to it. Those two games could really make or break. Like that could get to a point where if you could get a result back to back, whichever way it is, Glasgow or Edinburgh, could be the difference between a playoff and not, because of the timing in the season.
Totally, and actually, that's the big picture. The team stuff is potentially massive and could hinge on those two games. You pick up 10 points against another team trying to get in the playoffs over Christmas and New Year, and you're all of a sudden flying into the new year. But actually the individual stuff too, because 4 weeks from those games, 80% of those players involved will all be back in a Scotland camp saying, well, 4 weeks ago I was better than him, so I want that Scotland jersey. They're really interesting games. So yeah, look, it's all set up.
The next bit to this, and it's beginning to feel like we could talk all night, but I'm just those European games, and we've got to stop calling it European games when you've got to go and play the Stormers. Like that's, I think Joe Marler did that in a post-match press conference. He was like, "Hang on, and they're where? South Africa? Yeah, it's like how." I think it is important to play those and play your strong team, but it might be that they become games where there's rotation and you go, right, we're going to give you a shot, and by all means, if you play well, you might get in the URC team. But actually, and
you see that so often with the French clubs, don't you? That they play their strong team in the first game, and actually, once they've worked out either we're through or there's basically no hope of us qualifying here, all the big names are rested. They play their second team, but actually, it's an opportunity for those boys to put their hands up, and that can be a good thing. It can disrupt your team a bit, I think.
Spectators are not going to. It's not going to wash though, is it? Because if you've bought a ticket to go and watch it, you're expecting and hoping that it's going to be a belter. And I think the league is now at a point where every game is relentless. You're not able to go, oh, we'll beat them by 20 or 30. And even those Welsh teams who seem like they're under the pump from what I can gather, I just think that's going to be really, really tough.
I agree.
To think that you can rotate against them, I think is dangerous, because it would just take one banana skin and all of a sudden you're not in the playoffs.
This is it. Actually, the jeopardy of not making the playoffs is what makes the URC. There might not be a relegation element, but there's so much for teams to lose by not making the playoffs
yeah, you're right. It's almost like a relegation further up the league.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said earlier, you're talking about the strength of the teams. I think overall that base level has risen over the last, since the introduction of the South African teams. But so now Scarlets might be finishing 13th or wherever, but they are a better team than they were, that's maybe a bad example, but you know the idea.
No, I get. Well, it's like the Italian teams. The Italian teams now, like
Totally.
they were the poorest, and now they're not. Yeah, it's going to be an absolute cracker. I cannot call it. I've got no idea which way it's going. Talking of Test rugby that I'm buzzing for, Scotland women.
Yes.
Coming up.
Back at the Hive.
You know, back at the Hive, which is so good. Like it's so much better being there. Easy to get to, atmosphere's good. They're beginning to make it feel like that is properly home. Wales will be tough. That it's one of those ones where I think probably for the past couple of years we've thought, oh yeah, we'll win that, and then it's been tougher than maybe any of us really predicted or thought. But the depth that's coming through in that squad, Fraser Brown added as a coach as well, which I see Rachel Malcolm's come out and said, oh no, he's made a good impression. I spoke to Fraser not long ago, and his knowledge of not just the women's game, but the game from top to bottom in Scotland is very, very strong, from schoolboys to the pro teams to the women to the Celtic League with the Edinburgh and Glasgow obviously was involved. His knowledge is absolutely top drawer.
And actually, it was really interesting to hear Rachel Malcolm say, yeah, he came in and he knew all our names, and that was enough for them to give him that respect, because you could walk into an environment, yes, it's an international setup, but you could walk in and say, I've got 61 caps for Scotland, I've just retired, this is about me. But actually, and it's quite a brave thing for Fraser to do so soon after retiring from his own playing career, because I imagine it takes a bit of readjustment from player to coach. But suppose
but Fraser's smart. He's been planning this, and
he's been in it for a while
to do it. Yeah, and he's put in the graft. It's not always true, but he's done Super Six. He's done a lot of coaching where he's arrived and he's done things, and things that possibly haven't been on social media. But Fraser's put in the hard yards, and then he's done things already in the women's game. I think it will be interesting. He's in there. I did think it with the Olympics. The American head coach was the only female.
Yeah.
I'd love to think Claire Cruikshank and maybe Lindsay Smith at points in the future, and Louise Dalglish and some of the good young female coaches are going to come through. But at the moment, Burnley's still the man at the top. I really hope they can do well at home, because it'll just go such a long way to lifting the feeling again for the women's game in the country.
Totally. And actually, if they do well in these two games, the home advantage has been the kind of tipping point in games against Wales recently. I know Scotland won in Cardiff this year, but that has tended to play quite a big part. So if there's a decent crowd, and if they do get off to a winning start, then they've got Fiji next, totally different challenge, but I mean, that should be pretty entertaining, but one that I would expect Scotland to win. Then
how cool will it be to see the Fijian community come and support that? Like the Fijian community in Scotland to be at the Hive,
and they always
that
do, and it's brilliant. And actually, we're talking about tonight, like it's blue skies and sunshine here. That game's 3 weeks away, or 4 weeks away, and actually it could be the same. Like
I'm a bit the Welsh game being on a Friday night bothers me a wee bit, because I would it'll be great atmosphere, I think, but I'm not sure how many Welsh fans will be there on a Friday night. The Fiji game's a different kettle of fish, because the away support will be local. And it's a Saturday afternoon. But I think both games have got potential. If it's decent weather, it could be two brilliant nights at the Hive. And I reckon, I know, and I've spoken about Emma Orr a lot, I reckon it's now time for her to really tear it up.
I think you look at, we talked about this before, but when you look at that inaugural Women's Lions squad, she is somebody who now should be justifiably saying, I want to be in that squad. Her and Evie Gallagher, I think, are two who could say, I fancy, I want to be part of that. And
do you know what we were talking, or you were talking about the players being played in different positions? It's going to be an interesting period for Meryl Smith.
Totally.
Because she's so good. 10, 12, 15, but Chloe's there, Tomo's back on this sort of bounce of the Olympian. Nellie's still there. It's like where does Meryl go? Where does Meryl fit? Because she'd be good enough to be in. But so is Chloe Rowley, and so is Helen Nelson, so is Lisa Thompson, and there's other, like the back three now, the competition in the back three, or the competition on the wings now, it is tough. I think Emma Orr is a stick on at 13.
I think, and that's
scrum half, even Jenny Maxwell's back.
And you look at number 8, talking about Evie, number 8, Jade Conkle's back. So then you say, right, actually, what's the best makeup of your back row? Do you have to have Rachel McLachlan or Alex Stewart at 7? Do you have to have Rachel Malcolm because she's captain at 6? It becomes that tough. And actually,
but it's class though, because the bench hasn't. I think Brian's found it difficult to go to the bench in certain games.
Totally. I think when the minute you get one or two injuries, you start. You can see him holding one or two players back, and you think, does he have implicit trust in that bench? Whereas actually, with everybody fit, which is probably the point I've interrupted you making, with everybody fit, they could have a bench that actually makes a real difference. You look at, we've not even spoken about somebody like Louise McMillan. I presume your second row would be Emma Wassell and Sarah Bonner, but she could force her way in there. And if not, she might actually force her way into the back row somewhere. So how do you juggle all that? It's really interesting. And I think that Brian spoke a wee bit before about, like, these are elite environments. If it means dropping Helen Nelson, Emma Wassell, Rachel, then I'm going to do it, because it's for the, this is what I'm being asked to do as a kind of elite level head coach. So yeah, I think it all seems to be moving in the right direction. It's obviously a big year with World Cup. I think they're almost guaranteed to qualify. Basically got to turn up and fulfill the duties at WXV, I think, to make it through.
Yeah, but again, we're back to that sort of with the spark. Like, there's an excitement. There's people want to go and watch because the product is good. That's because the players are being elevated and are performing at a higher level. It kind of makes me laugh when you see the women's Premiership team lists, and Loughborough's just rammed with Scots. But
yeah,
if that's where they have to go to get game time and to play at a higher level, great, and it leaves the door open for somebody else to fill that vacuum when we're in Glasgow. I just, if they can get Wales right, which will likely, I think Brian surely picks his strongest team against Wales.
I think so.
And then Fiji is maybe where he's able to not experiment, because that's not where he is now, but he's able to give other players more game time so that they're a bit more tested for going to WXV. I think it's really exciting. I think it's really, really exciting. Like, Jenny Maxwell, I think, is buzzing to be back.
Yeah, like, no wonder, having been through what she's been through over the last couple of, not even couple, I was going to say couple of years, but it feels like she's hardly played forever. And before we continue on the women's team, Bruce, I'm going to circle back, because we've had a comment about Edinburgh and Glasgow, which I want to show you, which I think is very valid. It's not just winning; bonus points make all the difference, as Paul mentioned.
Paul, hey, he's the man at the top, so I'll agree. I'll agree with whatever Paul Denton says.
But
I think he's about to be made Lord Mayor of Kirkcaldy as well. So if Paul Denton says bonus points, then bonus points are what it is.
exactly that. I knew you would enjoy that.
The bonus points in the championships changed in the rugby championship.
Yeah, so it's interesting that it's gone to the same format as the French top 14, that you have to be 3 tries. So rather than just scoring 4 tries, you have to be 3 clear of your opposition. So,
Yeah.
like Argentina didn't get one
Yeah.
for beating the All Blacks because they only scored 1 more try.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that, but the bonus points one, I agree. I think it's important. I just wonder, and I've never been in the professional environment, but it was the kind of thing as a coach you did talk about. But I wonder when it comes into the player's consciousness during the game. So is it you're just kind of going along, and then when you get to 3, it's like, right, now we're going to kick the corner and catch and drive, or we're going to take the scrum. The taking scrums and kicking to the touchline for 5-meter lineouts inside the 22 blows my mind. Why not tap and play and take the referee out the game? Because let's face it, you could blow your whistle and put your arm in the air at a scrum for either side and somebody's unhappy. You can kick to the corner, catch and drive, and the ref decides, right, you blocked off, you did that, squint throw. Just tap and play.
It's an interesting one, particularly because you know this law change whereby if you don't contest it and a line out is a squint throw, it's play on. So
Said that for a
actually,
million years. I'm so pleased that was brought in.
but if you're 5 meters out, then what do? Do you put somebody up in the air and compete and force the hooker to throw it straight, or do you stay on the ground and say, well, we'll defend them all, even if the line out throws 3 feet squint?
Well,
You
but
know,
there should be an advantage to the attacking team. So go for it. That's your call to make. Like that's what winds me up about the scrum. That the scrum was so difficult because if I'm the hooker and I raise my foot to hook the ball, it's actually 8 against 7. So the attacking team's not got an advantage. That's why the ball gets thrown at the number 8's feet.
yeah,
Because the
no,
attacking
totally.
team is supposed to have the advantage. So that one I didn't mind, but the you know the announcer at Edinburgh, the number of times that he's said, "Come on, get on your feet and let's push them over," and then the ref blows for a squint throw and the game finishes, and everybody goes, "Oh, like I don't know who that guy is, but sometimes
I'm
he
not.
needs to wind his neck in."
I'm not sure he knows what he's watching. Really,
Nah, neither am I.
I've also
I
heard
did
he's
feel
had
it.
complaints in the past for being too loud. So you know,
Well, I have to say, I made sure I filled in the Edinburgh questionnaire, and I was very honest about my thoughts on the announcer at the Hive. Yeah, I would like them to play. I think, and some teams have done it really well, and and you've got 10 meters. Like that's an amazing advantage inside the 22-meter line. Why are you kicking it to touch for so many things that can go wrong? Because let's face it, the guy that's chucking it in is blaming the lifters, and the jumper's blaming the boy chucking it in, and the like. Just play rugby.
and that's it.
Be
Like,
creative. Start
yeah,
building a wall again. Everybody loves a penalty move with a wall. Everybody.
everybody. That is universal. I would be stunned if we get anybody in response to this video that says, I am totally against tap penalty moves where we wall where somebody
I,
does something daft.
I would cheer the wall. I didn't care if they score after it. I would be cheering the setup. As soon as I see 3 forwards going standing shoulder to shoulder with their backs to the opposition, I'm happy. We had one at Gala Academy and it was called International, and it was brilliant. Pete Coburn scored all the time.
Back
Loved
in
it.
the glory days. Yeah, no, look,
Bill
it's
Bill Noble found it for a Welsh video in 1974, I think, and he christened it International, and I loved that. It's a wee bit of creativity.
But actually, you're starting to see whether it's like South Africa at the World Cup taking the scrum off the mark inside their own 22. You know, the double line out pod thing that they did at the weekend. Actually, they are the one team who are saying, look, we're going to come up with some pretty unusual stuff. The 2019 World Cup, you know, there's a kind of famous bit now in the Chasing the Sun documentary where they all talk about setting up a mall in the middle of the field. Like, they are the team. Yes, they got a lot of stick for it being pretty boring at times, but actually, they're the ones doing a bit of innovating as well. And I think everybody else is a bit catching up to do because, yeah, you're right. Like, why not tap and go when you're 22? And Razzie is bonkers.
But it's also, you're able to do it because you've got the players and the raw material to do it. Like, that's. Totally. By the way, that was you that swapped us off as Scotland women. I'm not taking the rap for that. I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to take my girls to it. I'm delighted there's a Friday night game because I think that's class. That can lift the atmosphere. And having Fiji, like, believe it or not, I nearly fell out with my wife at the Olympic final because she was supporting France. I was like, how, don't ever go against Fiji. Like, the only time I don't support Fiji is if they're playing Scotland. I remember getting pelters for posting the video when Fiji beat England, and I was on the back pitches at Murrayfield with a big screen, and I took a wee video clip of the final whistle, and folk were going, "Oh, you're anti-English." And I'm not anti-English. I'm pro-Fijian. I love it. I would have done that if Fiji had beaten anybody. It just so happened to beat England at Twickenham.
Yeah, which always helps. Not everybody's second.
I was the stadium announcer when Scotland played Fiji. I think that was actually my first game as announcer at Murrayfield. Good lad. Thanks, Paul. I've always enjoyed his support. I was the stadium announcer when Scotland played Fiji, and Bill Mata scored, and I gave it the try scorer for Fiji, Big Bill Mata. Nobody cheered. I said, hang on. We all cheer for him when he scores over there. Why are we not? Just because he's... that upset me. I was sad. That's probably why I didn't get asked back.
That's probably a story for another day. But yeah, you're right.
Story for another day.
They'll be in. There'll be great
I'm buzzing
games
for those two games. Great time of the year as well.
Totally.
September.
And actually, if they do go on a bit of a run, you know, like Rachel Malcolm said, this year their kind of priority isn't going out to South Africa and winning WXV. It's more about building for this World Cup. But nothing wrong with building a bit of... Nothing wrong with building a bit of silverware.
Do you know something? Being in the media, I would find that so difficult to listen to the media churned out answers.
You just want people to be... Rugby needs characters and it needs people with opinions, and I would love more people to tell us
I think
what the first thing is that comes out their mouth, rather than, I better not say this.
For Scotland women to back up WXV2 would be massive, and for them to beat Wales and Fiji, and all of a sudden, you know, there's a bounce, and players, you learn more when you lose. Absolute horse poo. Let's learn when we're winning and be really annoying. Are you telling me that the All Blacks, the most successful sporting team ever, aren't they learning as much as everybody else? The Springboks under Razzie they're not learning because they're not getting beat. They are.
How are these teams learning more? They win all the time. The environment.
Anyway, I love Rachel. I would follow her into battle. I think she's absolutely class. And they'll be wanting to win. You're not telling me they're going to sit in the sheds after a game and go, it's all right, folks, because we played well, but we just lost to the final of WXV2. No chance. And that group now know what it's like. They want more. They were all chuffed to get Tomo into the Olympics. They're chuffed to win WXV2. They want to finish third in the Six Nations, and winning WXV2 is a building block towards that.
Yeah, and there was a wee sense from me that last time going to the World Cup felt like the achievement was getting there.
Yeah.
I feel like this time they are better equipped.
Their cup final was getting there. Yeah, agree.
But
agree.
The
Which is understandable.
Totally. And, 12 years away.
And in the environment, COVID, it was the other side of the world. We're in New Zealand, all those things. I get all that, but there's a lot of that squad will be hungry to go again and be able to say we've won at the World Cup. Because they were so close. So close. Now excited. Listen, my man, and my tea's on. Great to see you. Thank you. I'm wearing my Kowloon t-shirt because my man Stevie Daniels, that I played with many years ago, is sadly no longer with us. So this is my wee tribute to Stevie D, who'd had these mental health battles, and great guy. He was a prop, right? When he first turned up at the club, he was a centre, and very quickly they were like, "Nah, you're a prop." Stevie cracked me up. Stevie was a hard man, and he was a hopeless rugby player. But geez, he could prop. You remember the grid when you do truck and trailer?
Yeah.
One long pass, get a wee short one. We would do that in the warm up, and like you're supposed to be getting psyched up, and I would have to stand out because I'd be laughing because Stevie couldn't do it. So we would all be doing truck and trailer and getting and Stevie would stand at the side giving it the hamstring stretch because he just couldn't work out truck and trailer.
He's going with it.
Just couldn't do it. But if you asked him to push in a scrum, did Stevie like pushing a scrum? So Stevie's no longer with us. Another reason we got to look after each other. Another reminder for me. So I've got my Kowloon top on for Stevie D. So look after yourself, big man. It's been great to see you. Thanks again.
Yeah, you too. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, cheers, my man. Scotland Rugby News podcast signing off from me, your host Bruce, and him, the editor Gav. Sign up now. £1 for 6 months, 12 for a year. Get involved. You get all this great content, and you get to listen to us. Cheers, Gav. See you next week.
Cheers, Bruce.